All right. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. Hello and welcome to Fanshawe College's virtual open house. My name is Priyank Mistry and I work in Fanshawe International of Fanshawe College. I will be your host for today's session. But before we begin, I would like to mention some housekeeping items. If we can move on to the next slide. All right, so just a few instructions before we begin today's session. All the participants' webcams and mics are turned off, but it does not mean that you cannot engage with us. You do have an option to ask us questions throughout this session, and please do not hesitate to ask any questions related to the program using the question feature, which you will see on the right side of your screen if you are joining us from your laptop or computer, or at the bottom of your screen if you are joining us from the mobile phone. Following the session, we will have a live Q&A from the questions that you have submitted, and we will try to get through all of them by the end of the session. If you still have more questions, even after we finish up, we do have an option that you can send us an email using myfuture@fanshawec.ca email address, or you can book an appointment with one of our recruiters by visiting our website. One last thing I would like to mention is if you have multiple programs open on your computer, please close them to experience the webinar without any compromise. And now we will begin today's session. So I would like to introduce our speaker for the day, Professor John and Professor Mike, who will be speaking about our program, Computer System Technology and Technician at Fanshawe College. I'll be back again for the live Q&A, and now I'm going to pass it over to Professor Mike and John. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to connect with us live. And if you are watching this afterwards, thank you also for taking the time and to check this out and interest in our programs. My name is Mike Mcmorgan. I am a full-time professor and one of the coordinators, and with me is John, who is also a coordinator of the two programs. An overview of today's sessions. We're going to look at the types of courses that are in both programs, and then we're going to sort of compare the two programs. That's a common question that comes up. And then we're going to look at the way the two programs progress, so what it looks like from month to month, what a class might look like, job prospects. Both of these programs do require a laptop, even while we are working remotely, and then we'll have time at the end for some questions and answers. Both programs focus on these bullet points here in regards to the technologies. These technologies are common in the field. We're not just making them up, which is the first point here, that our programs are driven by feedback we get from employers and trends that we see in industry. So in general, we're going to be working with networks, operating systems, cloud computing, telecommunications, and security. So it's a very broad approach to studying and understanding IT. The last 2 points at the bottom, you can see there's a difference between the two programs that we're starting to talk about here. So a CTN graduate, typically that role, and we'll talk more about this later in regards to job prospects, but typically that role would be in a frontline support. So some of the ways you may have heard this are also a help desk or a service desk role, whereas the CTY graduate would be able to also do the frontline or service desk support, but also do stuff in the back end. So things like network administration, security, or systems administration. And you'd also be able to start to specialize in some of these roles if that's something you'd like to do as well.
So we can look at the CTY versus CTN. I'll discuss a little bit about the CTY program. So the CTY program, there's a 3-year advanced. It is a 3-year advanced diploma, and it is a co-op program. So co-op program being paid work terms. Pathways to post-grad programs, high employment rate for graduations, and we do look for students with specific skill sets coming into the CTY program. And it's less about the technology background versus, because we're going to start you off fresh as if we haven't worked with too much with computers at this point, but we're looking at different personal skills. So to be enthusiastic about technology, excellent attendance, excellent time management skills, enjoy working with others, strong communication skills. And this last item really sets apart for the 3-year program, the ability to research and do some problem solving skills. So a lot of self-direction within the 3-year program.
The Ctn program is similar, and you'll see the similarities when we actually dive into the courses, at least in the first year, technically. But overall, you still need the same type of skill set to be successful in regards to enthusiasm, attend the lectures and the labs, and manage your time in regards to even doing assignments and things in the labs as well. You're still going to be working with others. So the second last point under the Ctn, because there's still project work and a milestone project. The big difference is typically you're not going to be as diving deep into research and large technical issues.
Okay, so for some of the experience you'll gain throughout our program for the CTY, the 3-year program, we'll be diving into some core areas. So operating systems, network, virtualization, Active Directory, and some security aspects. Specifically with the networking, we get into some CCNP certification type courses, or based on the CCNP curriculum. We focus our networking courses more for administrating the systems versus just the frontline support. We do the frontline support as well, but also the administration portion of that. Virtualization, we start looking at enterprise solutions on how to build out virtual infrastructures in an enterprise network. And same with the server side for Active Directory and what have you. So there's some differences there. So when we look into the CTN, I might talk about the CTN part.
So the Ctn, you still touch on the same technologies in regards to operating systems and network, and some of the other things such as VoIP and server-side support in regards to web and databases. Typically, you come out with an intermediate knowledge of that just because it is a 2-year program, so you're studying a little bit less. The other thing I wanted to point out here in both programs is that you're studying in a multi-vendor environment. So what I mean by that is, as John mentioned, in the networking side, we typically follow the Cisco curriculum. And in CTN, you will have gone through the courses that are part of the CCNA certification. However, we also look at other vendors within both programs. So for example, in the firewall course, we look at firewalls other than Cisco as well. And you can see just from this slide that we're not just looking at Windows operating systems, but that includes Linux also.
Okay, so co-op, the 3-year program has the co-op portion. So co-ops are paid, but they're not guaranteed. So something to keep in mind, it is an application process. So you do have to apply for these jobs. The employers do see your grades. So maintaining a good grade point average, good grades, is very important to getting a selection for your job. Our placement rate is typically pretty high. That's for students who are interested in the co-op. So that would be students that are applying to jobs, and students who aren't focused on a very narrow set of jobs. For example, just in the London area, they might go to Toronto or whatnot too. So students can work in any workplace settings. There are 3 co-op terms. Now, we'll get into the progression later on. 2 of the co-op terms are back-to-back, which is something the employers really liked, so that students can work on projects and they don't have to spend a lot of the time retraining students into a new environment, and so on and so forth. So that's the co-op position. You can graduate CTY without completing the co-op terms, but keep in mind you don't get back into the academics during your co-op period. You would still have to follow the same progression. For the 3-year program, you'll have terms without working experience at that time. So for the CTY program progression, we only have one intake for the 3-year program, and that's in September. Our level 1 and level 2 are full semesters, and they run in our fall and our winter semesters. We do have a spring semester, which is shorter than a full-length semester. So this is really half a semester, so 7 weeks instead of our regular 14, 15-week semester. So level 3 is a half semester, and then you have a summer break, and you go into your first co-op semester. So during level 3 is when you're going to be applying for jobs for the first co-op opportunity there. After co-op, you'll come back in the winter semester and complete level 4, another level half semester, level 5, and another break. Then you come back from break and complete level 6 as a full term in the fall. And then this is where you get to your 2 co-op terms back to back. So that goes through winter, spring, and summer. So that's 2 terms, spring and summer being 1 full term. And then you come back for your final term in the fall for level 7, and you'll graduate from CTY. So some of the courses, this is our level 1, 2, and 3 courses. We start off our level 1 fairly light. We get into the basics of operating systems, the basic of networking, databases. Those are kind of our core areas. And we do have a lot of softer skill courses, and that's something that our employers really want us to focus more on with their students, is the softer skills, and it's often hard for students to kind of get into that mindset. So do focus on the softer skills, but also importantly focus on those technical skills as well. Level 2 will continue on into the networking, operating systems. We'll introduce some programming and security fundamentals as well. And there's also a co-op education employment prep. So we actually have a co-op consultant that comes in, helps you work on your resumes during the level 2 semester, and starts posting jobs. So we have a lot of employers that work with us to get co-op opportunities. So our co-op consultant does bring them in and has regular postings for jobs that are just for our co-op students. But again, they are open. You have to apply to all these jobs. So it is a competitive market. So after that, you get into your compressed term. That's what we talk about compressed is the half term, a shorter term. So there's less courses, but more hours within each of those courses. So we focus on some Linux, again, some security with the Edge support. And we talk about how do we manage service desk and working with end users in our enterprise support class. And that's really important because the next term is our co-op term. So understanding how to work with users and how to kind of go through those basic troubleshooting skill sets is super important before going out into the first co-op. So something to keep in mind is level 1 and level 2 are the same levels as our CTN program. So if you're in the CTY program and you take level 1 and you decide to go into the 2-year program after that, academically speaking, you can go into level 2 CTN without retaking any courses in level 1. Including after level 2, you can go into level 3 CTN without retaking any courses in level 1 or 2. Where the courses or programs start to separate is in level 3. So once you get past level 3 and you want to switch programs, you're going to have to go back and redo different courses. One course to keep in mind is the co-op education employment prep. Because our 2-year program does not have co-op, they do not get this prep course in level 2. So going from CTN to CTY, we have a little bit more restrictions for that, which Mike will talk about later on. Level 4, again, we're going to continue with some operating systems in the Windows side of things, some more networking. We'll get into some scripting, some more database, and voice over IP, so telecommunications. Level 5 is, again, our half term. We'll get into storage and data management. So this is an enterprise level kind of storage system, which is required when we get into virtualization a little later on. We get into some more Linux and some wireless as well in that term. And then on the last 2 levels, we'll get into more operating systems, both in the Windows and Linux side, some more advanced networking. We'll get into some project management and enterprise virtualization. And then level 7, we kind of wrap everything up with some messaging, some security courses, some integration and scaling courses, and more like a capstone project course where you're going to apply all the knowledge you've learned in your time through this program into a real life scenario environment, practical environment. So I'll hand over to Mike for the CTN progression.
Thank you. So the CTN has two different intakes. So you see on the left, there's a fall intake, and then there's a winter intake. Focus your attention on the fall intake table first. So you see that level 1 begins in September, and it goes straight through. So this is a bit different than CTY. So we can see that level 1, 2, 3 goes all the way through May, June, July, August. There is no break. Then you stay on, come back in the fall for the second year, and then you're done in December. So there's a fall intake, there's no break, you go straight through the summer, and then you're all done the next fall. There is a second intake for CTN only, so there's not a second intake for CTY, as John mentioned. That second intake, we call it a winter intake, which begins in January. But similarly, you can see there's no break. So level 1, level 2 goes straight through the summer, and you stay on for level 3 and 4 through the fall, and then the following winter. So in both versions of this progression, there's no break. You just come in and you go straight through. In regards to actually what's in the courses, level 1 and level 2 are identical to CTY, with the exception of the co-op prep course in level 2, as John mentioned. Other than that, the technical courses, such as the networks and the operating system and the database, is the same. Similarly, the soft skill courses, such as strategies for success, grit, and so on, those are the same as well. If you are in CTN and interested in switching over to CTY, typically that has to be done in the first level, because when you're done level 1, you have all of the same credits as a CTY student. So to transition to CTY would be more seamless. If you start to do level 2, you notice that you're going to be missing the co-op prep. So it's not as easy to switch over.
Just sorry to interject. One key point is that's for the fall intake only. Otherwise, you won't fall into the same sequence as CTY if you're in the winter intake.
I missed that again. Thanks.
That's okay.
And then to round, there's a delay. To round out the CTN program, we just have level 3 and 4. We still are focusing on things like operating system and networks. It's just at a different scale, different level than what we see in CTY. And the other thing I wanted to just point out in both programs is you can see we have security courses sort of sprinkled throughout the programs. It's also the case, and this is the way that the industry and learning is going, it's also the case that we study security within these technologies. So yes, we have actual security courses. For example, in level 4, we see security supporting the edge. However, when you study Linux operating systems, when you study Windows operating systems, when you study network fundamentals, network routing and switching, you study the security as it relates to those technologies as well. So we have security courses, but we also have security within all of the other courses and technologies. Over to John.
Yeah, so thank you, Mike. So what a typical classroom or class would look like, we're going to break it down into two phases. We have our COVID pandemic phase, which we're in right now. So right now, most classes are fully online. We do have some face-to-face, but those are in our later levels. So hopefully by the time anyone gets to those later levels, we'll be back to face-to-face and normal progressions with our classes anyways. We do virtualize the network and system environment right now, where normally you would have hands-on access to our networking gear, but we are able to virtualize it, so you can still work with the same kind of equipment, just in a virtual setting. Some levels will be blended. Again, that's where we do some face-to-face. One thing to Be clear on laptop. This is a laptop program, even when we're face-to-face. While we're on COVID, while we're online during COVID, laptop is still required. We are still going to be doing a lot of work on our laptop, and we're going to need it to complete lab assessments and so in just regular in-class work. Post-COVID, so when we get back to normal classes, a typical combined lecture is usually between, depending on the semester, but between 50 to 150 students at a time. So that's for the lecture. When we get into the lab classes, the more hands-on practical components, those are typically between 30 to 50 students. So a typical lab, we have two types of lab environments. We have our laptop room and our networking lab. So our laptop room is where we bring in our laptops, and we're going to be doing a lot of work virtualized on our laptops. So it's really important that we have a good laptop, working laptop. We'll get into the laptop specs in a moment. So this laptop room has a place for students to use their laptop, plug in, and power their laptops. And again, the lab activities will be completed on the student's laptop. Whereas in the networking lab, students will have access to the physical equipment, but still need their laptop to communicate with those equipment. So it is a laptop room as well as a network room where we have the network lab equipment. So I'll hand over to Mike. He's going to talk about the network lab equipment specifically.
Sure. So what you see on the, you see two pictures here. On the left-hand side is our network lab, and you see a whole bunch of equipment in the racks. If you look at the very top of that picture, you'll see the number 7 and the number 9. So typically in industry, we take equipment and we put it in what we call racks. So we'd see rack 7 and rack 9. And there's a lot of equipment in there. And then so sometimes the first question is, why is there so much equipment? Well, what these programs are preparing you for is to work with networks at a bigger scale. So they're preparing you to work on corporate networks or enterprise networks. These are networks that you would see in a hospital or in a bank or in larger institutions such as Fanshawe or other schools. What you have at home, I often compare this to your home network. So most of us have a home router, or we'll call it a home firewall router. That device is actually several things rolled into one. And that works for your home network, which is quite small. When we get into these corporate networks, we need to break out those devices that are rolled into your home router, and so they work in larger environments. So what you see on the left-hand picture are switches and routers and firewalls, all in separate pieces. Whereas that one device you have at home is a switch, a router, and a firewall, all rolled into one. So the idea of how your home network operates is important, and we use that to understand how we do that in corporate or larger networks. So that's one reason we see all this equipment. We break out the function of the different devices, such as routers and switches and firewalls. The other important thing to note about all this equipment is it will be the case that you will have opportunity to work with this equipment. You will not watch somebody else do the lab. There's enough equipment for all students to come in, plug cables in, plug their laptops in, try to configure this stuff, break it intentionally so we learn how to fix it, because that's what we're going to be doing in industry. That's the picture on the left. The picture on the right is actually our updated equipment. It's not a complete install. So this is just some of the equipment that's been added there. So we recently refreshed the networking lab, so all of the equipment is now more current. And I'm excited to get back in there and see it after we're done the pandemic.
There is another area in the in the college where we have what we call our student data center, and that's what we see in the pictures here. And this is an area where our 3-year program, when we get into virtualization and data management, and including the projects courses, they can go and work on this physical equipment to create enterprise level or scale level environments. And although students don't physically touch this equipment, just like a data center in the real world, they could be working on this from another room in the college and build on this remotely. And that's what we would do in real life, but it's important to understand the equipment. So we do tours through this environment as well. So Our CTY program typically is the ones that mostly use this, but we do take a look at this kind of things in our data center course in level 2 from both programs. Our equipment is managed by our IT lab techs, and we usually, every semester, we hire a co-op student from our program who also helps manage this stuff and keep it running for all the students. Ctn Job Market, there's a 2-year, so again, the 2-year diploma. The target market for jobs is the level 1 frontline support, and the average salary range reported by these links below is between $31,000 to $55,000 a year. And our typical employers that end up hiring our grads are listed on the left. So some hospitals, some banks, the city, colleges, university, school boards, and so on and so forth. CTY Job Market is a 3-year advanced diploma again. Same typical employers, but of course they're usually looking for the frontline support as well as the 2nd level support in infrastructure administration, deployments, and design. So there's a lot more opportunity to kind of, if you want to use this as a foundation and find yourself into into a specific specialized area down the road, you can do that as well. So the typical job market for a CTY grad would be anywhere between $35,000 and $72,000 without the specialization afterwards. Laptop requirements, again, this program is a laptop program. It's super important that we have a good working laptop. The second piece I want to talk about is not only is it important to have a good or meet these specs, is to make sure we have a good laptop that meets these specs, because you can find some cheaper versions of laptops that meet these specs, but they are slower, they don't perform well, they do fail more often, and these are things you're going to be creating or running tests on, practical tests, and lab assignments. So you want to make sure that it's a reliable machine. So do some research on that and make sure you're getting a good, reliable laptop. I'll hit on some key items on this laptop specs. It does need to have a CPU that's capable of virtualization. So anything with VT support from the Intel group or the AMD side of things for the AMD. Hard disk drive, we are running lots of virtual machines off of our laptop, so we do need a solid state drive. So those are a lot faster, and we do need the speed to run multiple machines at once on our laptop. So that's really critically important there. 512 gigs minimum. Again, we're running lots of systems on there, so it does take up a lot of disk space. And we do recommend another SSD drive as your external drive to back up these virtual machines. So if your laptop fails, you can plug it into another laptop and still have all your machine ready to go. 16 gigs of memory is minimum, 32 is recommended. We do need to have wireless, but of course for your Ethernet, when you're working in the networking labs, we need an Ethernet port. It needs to be capable of going up to 1 gig and as well as running at 10 and 100. We do need some USB ports, mics, and cameras. We do list here that we need an operating system of Windows 10 Enterprise, Pro, or Education. Now, if your laptop comes with Home Edition, don't go out and buy a new edition because we are part of the Connect program. So we do get Microsoft Azure Education licensing. So once you become a student here, there will be a tutorial on how to access this licensing, and you can go and pick out an education license and apply it to your machine at no extra cost. So if you do have Home Edition, don't, again, go out and buy a new version of Windows to support this. So that's our laptop specs. You can access the laptop specs at this URL here, connected.fanshawe.ca/laptop-requirements. So some frequently asked questions are, what is the difference between CTY CTN and CTY. The best way I can frame this is the CTN program is more accelerated and it's meant to get you out to the workforce quicker and more geared towards the frontline support staff. It doesn't mean that you can't, it still gives you foundation. You can still go and learn other things after you're done the program, but it doesn't give you as much foundation as the CTY program does if you want to go into a specialty. So the CTY program, again, has a focus on the frontline support, but as well as building more foundational support for specializing in a certain area of IT. So our employers have asked us that all of our students should be generalists. So we try to keep our programs at a generalist level where students can build up afterwards. How does co-op work? Am I guaranteed a job? Again, you do have to apply for the job. They are paid co-ops, but you're not guaranteed a job. So it is a competitive market. Do we get summers off? That depends on the program. Our 3-year program, our CTY program, does have a break twice in July, August, as you saw in the progression plan. But for the 2-year program, they are accelerated. They go right through, no breaks. Will I have a certification when I'm done? No, we're not a certification college, although we do apply or we do follow a lot of certification paths with our program and our courses. We don't actually provide the actual certification. And the last typical question we get is, can I suggest a laptop, like a brand or a manufacturer? We're really not supposed to promote one laptop brand over another, but I would suggest maybe look for something that's business class versus a personal laptop. Again, we need the reliability. So anything that's more on the business line is usually fairly suitable. And sometimes even the gaming laptops are pretty good as long as they meet those specifications. So with that said, we'll open up for any questions. I know we're tight for time. Sorry about that.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Mike and Professor John, for that in-depth information about the program. I think you did cover all the information that student may need, and unfortunately, we are a little bit above the time frame that we have for the session. So unfortunately, we won't be able to take many questions right now, or pretty much any question. But I think you did cover a lot of information. All the students. I also do not see too many questions coming in. So if students, you do have any questions that you would like to ask, please don't hesitate to email us at international@fanshawec.ca, or as you can see, the email address is here for the professors to reach out for these particular programs. And you can also connect with us by booking an appointment by visiting fanshawec.ca/connect. And hope you found this session really helpful and informational. And once again, thank you very much for tuning in. We do have more sessions coming up today for international Q&A on the open house, and tomorrow we have sessions for different division and programs. So don't forget to check out the website openhouse.fanshawec.ca to register for those as well. Once again, thank you very much, Professor John and Mike, and thank you everyone who attended and listened to the whole session patiently. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.